All right. Thank you so much, Jason. Jason Van Camp, for joining us here today on Pela and Company. You are a former Green Beret and the author of the book that I am so excited about, Deliberate Discomfort. Thank you for joining me.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity. Let's have some fun.
Yes, absolutely. Hey, the first thing that I wonder about, I mean, most people would ask, why exactly did you decide to join the service? And there's a lot of history you have, a lot of things that are really cool that I really want to come back around to. But I really am quite curious, why did you decide to write this book?
So I started this company, Mission 60, and the idea of it came about in 2011, 2012. And to make sure that the company was set up to be a very successful company, I worked with a lot of mentors. And I asked them a million questions. What should I be doing? How do I set this up? Who are my clients? And so forth. And the answer that I got back from everybody really was, Jason, you really need to start off by writing a book. Like, you need to have curriculum. You need to have material. I don't know of any company like this that has ever succeeded without a book first. So write the book first and then start the company. And at the time, I just kind of said, you know what? I'm not quite ready to write a book. I don't think I've had the life experiences yet. I just feel like I'm not inspired enough yet to write the book. I've got some ideas and some things, but I really want to start this business. I'm going to start the business first and see what happens. And so I started the business, and we were lucky to be successful right off the bat, to the surprise of a lot of my mentors, because I was essentially doing the exact opposite of what they told me to do, which was kind of crazy.
Right.
But in the back of my mind, I always said, I got to write a book. I got to write a book. In order for this company to really take off, we have to have a book. We have to have curriculum and material, like on paper, that people can see and we can hand off to people and clients. And so that was part of the inspiration to write the book. And then, personally, I just feel like Green Berets, they're called the quiet professionals. That's the nickname. And I've always tried to be a quiet professional.
Right.
And it's been uncomfortable for me to even talk or market myself or market the company. And I heard someone say years ago that although we're quiet professionals, we can't be silent professionals. If you've got something to say and it can help other people, it can help them liberate themselves from their own oppression, you need to stand up, find your courage, and speak and say something. Because all this bullshit about, I'm not going to say anything, I'm not going to market myself, like this and that, like, it's not going to work. You're not going to get anywhere if you take that attitude. If you really feel like you can help someone, you need to stop being a coward and stand up and say something. And so with that kind of impetus behind me, like, I felt like we could do some powerful things. And so that's also a reason why I wrote the book.
So when did you actually start writing?
So I have notes. I've literally got notes as far back as 2003, just of thoughts and ideas, things that I've read or things that I've liked or seen or conversations and so forth. And I started actually writing the book in May or June of 2018. And so I got that bug. I started getting inspired. I started to just write and just kind of sort of like word vomit, just on a screen, just write.
Yeah.
As much as you could. It wasn't edited. It wasn't formatted. It wasn't anything. It was just material. And I had something that I felt was really strong in January of 2019. And that's when I went and talked to a few publishing companies. I should have done more research, but I jumped on the first one that offered me an opportunity. And so I wrote from January until September. And that was just editing the book, whittling it down, make it into something tangible. When my editor first saw my material, he was like, bro, you got 845 pages here. when it's all said and done, like a formatted correctly, spell checked, like
Yeah.
proper indentations, paragraphs and everything. You're not going to write a book 845 pages. We need to whittle this down to like 250 pages.
Yeah.
And so we got it down to 288. And there was a lot of good stuff in there. I was like, oh man, I don't want to lose that. That's a really good conversation. I don't want to do that. So I've got a lot of material for my next book when that comes. But that's kind of how it went down. So you just kind of shorten everything. You cut a ton of stuff out. And we finished in September. And then we sent it to an editor in October, got it back in November, and then sent it to a printing company in late November, and they printed all the books out in like 2 or 3 weeks, and we were ready to go by Black Friday in November of 2019.
Honestly, I have never heard of anyone be able to put together your manuscript all the way up to print and go that fast. You really expedited that process for getting your book done and out there.
Oh, well, thank you. It was a lot of hard work. It was really uncomfortable. I actually learned to love it, and it was fun to just be inspired. Now, there were days when I was super inspired and I would just type and type and type and write. But then there were days when I set aside like, okay, there's a 2-hour block between 05 and 07 this morning, and I'd sit down and nothing would come to me. And I'd be like, I'm just forcing this. Like this sucks. Like so you have to kind of stop and just appreciate the moments when you're inspired and really write when those moments occur.
Right. It's interesting because it feels like your book really did come out of a place of deliberate discomfort. You weren't really way back in, years back, weren't really excited to jump right into writing this book. How did you overcome just that? I mean, that piece right there. How did you decide that deliberate discomfort was really what you wanted to share? The message of being willing to be deliberately uncomfortable.
Yeah, I understand. That's a great question. So, getting comfortable, being uncomfortable is a catalyst behind great things. And I wrote some articles for Inc. magazine with a friend of mine named Chris Desi, I think back in 2015 maybe. And he's a great guy, and he used to write every week or every couple of weeks for Inc. magazine. I don't think he does that any longer, but the articles that I wrote with him, 2 of them got a couple 100,000 views or likes or engagement or whatever they were measuring. And that was pretty good, and they were pretty happy with that. But the article that I wrote about getting comfortable being uncomfortable had like 5 million. So we were like, wow, like this particular article is really resonating. This has gone viral. This is trending. This is like something that people really want to learn about and know about and be. And so from there, I was like, wow, getting comfortable being uncomfortable is something that people want. They need it. They desire it. They have to have more of it. And so I transitioned my company, Mission 60, from being a leadership development company, which we still are, to being a company that helps leaders get comfortable being uncomfortable. And that's the niche that we've created for ourselves. That's kind of like the space that we're trying to own. We're trying to own the getting uncomfortable space.
Right. When you realized that the article had really hit, right, and it was taking off and people were really resonating with the idea you had, did it all of a sudden bring back certain memories to you, certain experiences that you had that said, yeah, this is where I forced myself to learn this art continuously of being uncomfortable?
Oh yeah. Like every day I try to embrace the discomfort. I try to do things that are difficult for me. Writing, speaking, things that scare the hell out of me, things that I'm nervous about, that the weak mind would say, Jason, you don't have to do that. Just stay in bed. Let's watch some TV. Let's hang out. You don't have to go to the gym. You don't have to go write this book. You don't have to go speak. You don't have to try these things. It's hard. It's difficult.
Right.
Why do you do those things? And to me, it's always about the journey. It's about improving yourself. It's about feeling a sense of accomplishment when you've faced those fears and you've tackled them and you've moved past it. And what's most exciting for me through all of that is when you get to do it with a team that has your back, that works well with you, that you can do it together and essentially see their faces when you're hoisting the trophies, when you're winning championships. It's not so much about hoisting the medal trophy and about that title. It's about, the expressions on the faces of the people you did it with.
Yeah.
That to me meant the most.
Yeah. When did you learn the value of a team?
I grew up playing sports,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't think I really understood the value of a team until my junior year of high school. And you could see, and it started to click, you started to click. You started to see that guys were depending on me, relying on me to do things so that we could win the game. They were counting on me. They were saying things about me like Jason's going to do it, or Jason, whatever. And then, understanding they were seniors as well, I kind of started to feel that way about them. Like our quarterback, Matt, a great friend of mine at the time, I was like, man, he's going to figure out a way to score this touchdown. We're going to win the game.
Yeah.
Damone, our running back, he's going to figure out how to do this. He's going to score. We're going to win, and just to realize, wow, we're winning. And these guys are good dudes, and they're my friends, and they're awesome people, and we're doing it together like that. And it wasn't like, oh, it's not about my stats or it's not about whatever. It's just about winning and winning together.
Mm-hmm.
That's when it clicked for me. And then the next year, with the sports that I played in high school, I became a captain of all the sports I played. And so guys were looking up to me even more than they did.
Right.
And I had to step up and really understand that if we're going to be successful, it's not because of my abilities or my accomplishments. It's because we're together as a team, and I've really got to bring out the best in these guys. And if I do that, then we can get what we want as a team. And then when I went to college, you saw that on an even higher level. It's essentially, I went to a military college.
Yeah.
So
West
you
Point.
really learn about the military leadership mindset and about toughness, and it was just you were going from essentially, a high school level to a PhD level when you're going to West Point, learning about teamwork and leadership.
Yeah. So now tell me, how did you end up why did you end up at West Point of all schools?
I wasn't good enough to play Division I football anywhere else.
We'll leave that commentary and just say, oh, okay, West Point, okay.
I know I could have played in other schools. I know it deep down. But I just, you got to be tall and fast and strong, and you got to have all that stuff. I started getting recruited by a lot of top end Division I programs just because of my stats and,
Right.
stuff in high school. But then when they came to see me, they're like, oh man, this guy's 6 foot tall. He's 185 pounds. He's a linebacker. He's too small to play for us,
Yeah.
And I could only control what I could control. And that was, working out, putting forth the effort.
Yeah.
So I was kind of like a gym rat, a workout demon. I just spent so much time in the weight room.
Yeah.
And, I couldn't gain any weight. Now, I can't stop gaining weight. But at the time, like, I could not gain any weight. I could get strong. I was strong as hell, but I just, to crest over that 200-pound mark, that was like impossible for me, and that's kind of how it was in high school.
And how did that end up? Did your time at West Point lead to your special forces career or no?
I would say the opposite. So I didn't really enjoy most of my experience at West Point. And so when I got to the Army, I said, as the military, if the military is anything like West Point, I'm not going to be here very long. I'm going to roll out and after 5 years or whatever, my commitment is up and do something different.
Right.
And to my surprise, happily, I was surprised that the Army, my experience in the Army was fantastic. I loved it. Loved every second of it. It was amazing. And I wanted to make a full career out of it.
Yeah.
And so just little things that occurred in my journey that kind of inspired me to volunteer to go to Ranger School, and then become a Ranger, and then volunteer to go to Korea, volunteer to try out for the Special Forces, and I guess my friends sort of motivated me to try out, to join, and to do those things.
Yeah.
And then just kind of the unknown, the fear, like, can I do it? This is, this is a scary thing, like if I do this, I think good things will happen, and not understanding fully the deliberate discomfort mindset, just knowing that when you choose hard things, good things will happen to you.
Can you just deep dive a little bit more on that thought?
Yeah, I think in life, hard things are going to happen. So either you choose the hard things, or hard things are going to choose you. They're going to happen either way.
Right.
You might as well have a choice. You might as well have the autonomy, and I feel like something I've been saying a lot of lately is people want you to think like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm telling people, if it ain't broke, break it and make it better. Take the initiative to break something, to do something differently before it breaks or before it chooses you. And that's the mindset of deliberate discomfort.
Mm-hmm. What is it that made you think of that specific term of break it and make it better? Did something happen? Was there some sort of event that said, yeah, this needs to change, this mindset of, if it's not broken, don't fix it?
I think, really deep diving into the getting comfortable, being uncomfortable mindset, doing research, talking to the people on my team, talking to the veterans, talking to the scientists, understanding what this philosophy means to them.
Right.
And then really reflecting on it and saying, wow, like this is even deep. This is some powerful stuff here. It's really not just talking it but also walking it by saying, listen, if I'm telling people to do this, if I'm preaching this, if this is what my company's all about, am I doing it myself? And so me like actively becoming a major catalyst for change, a proponent of this philosophy of saying, this is the way. I live this, I do this, and it's working, and it will work for you as well. And just to be authentic and honest and humble about that. And it isn't about, a lot of other military guys in my space will kind of make it seem as though they're Superman, like the Garretts and the Jockos and those guys and the Goggins, and like, we're invincible. Like, no, you're not invincible. We know you're not invincible. You're not invincible. Yeah. And I don't want to be a guy that people think, oh, he thinks he's Superman, or he's trying to portray himself as Superman. I'm not that at all. What I am trying to be is basically Obi-Wan Kenobi. I'm trying to become the mentor to you, and you can be the hero. You can be the Luke Skywalker of your own journey. That's what I want to be.
Yeah. Actually, I've read a lot of books from the other people that you've mentioned.
And I'm not saying anything negative about it. They're great with what they do. We just do it differently.
Right. And I did notice that difference in the presentation and in your philosophy, that you very much embrace this idea of humility. And I heard stories that you had told. I believe there was a deployment that you had. One just went off without a hitch. It was very peaceful. And the second one, everything just kind of fell apart almost right out the gate. I think you mentioned that you were down 2 members for the entire time that you guys were out as a team. And I wonder, what kind of situations have you found yourself in that have just really reminded you constantly that as a leader, humility is such a big, because that it really comes across pretty strong in your whole book. that humility as a leader is part of the foundation of this discomfort?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, um, historically, I've never been one to back down from a fight.
Yeah, you
You
don't.
know, I've been a pretty good fighter, like just growing up and just doing that. So I've never really shied away from that.
Mhm.
And as you become a leader and you see more and more of it, you kind of see, especially when you start a business, that people get very emotional and they get offended really quickly.
Right.
So if I fought every battle, like I wouldn't have any time to do anything. It wouldn't amount to anything. It would be a complete waste of time. And so I've taken the opposite approach and just said, listen, let me be humble. Let me look at myself and try to be empathetic and say, what is it that you're so upset about? Let me put myself in your shoes. Let me try to understand where you're coming from.
Mhm.
And I'm not going to get emotional over this at all.
Right.
We're going to come to a decision, because even in combat, when you're negotiating, you realize, like, if you can just be calm and steady,
Yeah.
no matter how emotional the other guy is, no matter how much he wants to fight you or kill you or whatever, if you can just be cool and calm and just talk like this, and know in the back of your mind, like, all right, if this guy wants to start something, I'm good. I can take care of myself, like verbally, I could verbally knock this dude out, or I could, actually knock this dude out. If you have that confidence in your mind, like, okay, let's just be calm and just talk through this,
Mhm.
and we can figure out a solution, because I'd rather turn my enemies into my friends than keep them as my enemies.
I feel like you're talking about a specific situation, like somewhere you were playing back something that's already happened. Was there a time that is like coming to the front of your mind where you really had to just, hey, be calm, be cool, and not turn this small thing into something that was huge?
So many, Pella. The one that it kind of comes to the forefront of my mind. First off, this happens every single day in business. Somebody is upset about something, and so you have to calm them down, and you have to be professional, and you can't um, send them anything via email or in writing that could set them off, because text writing can be misinterpreted so often.
Right.
So if anything starts to explode,
Mhm.
I always say, hey, give me a call. Let's talk. Let's have a conversation about this, because what I'm saying or what you're saying via text or email or whatever, it's being misunderstood right now.
Right.
But I remember, one time, I don't know why this is coming to my mind, but I was in the military and we were doing a road march, and I was a first lieutenant in the vehicle behind some of the guys, and we were kind of following them. I had broken my ankle.
Mm.
And so my driver mistakenly sort of just bumped one of the guys on the road. Not even hard, just not even, it wasn't anything. And
Right.
I stopped him. I said, hey, man, like, are you okay? And he's like, oh, I'm so sorry, whatever. And one of the sergeants that was in the road march, he exploded, and he came to the Humvee, and he was like, are you kidding me? Like, he just started screaming. And I just like looked at him, just super calm. I was like, hey, it was a mistake. Did you see the guy? To my driver? And he's like, I didn't see him. I'm sorry. He's like, it was a mistake. He said he's sorry. It
Yeah.
was an accident. And the guy just kept going and going. And I just kind of looked at him and just kind of like just kept it cool and calm. I was like, you good, man? And finally he was just kind of like, well, yeah, I'm good. I'm like, okay, we'll talk to you later. And he just like left.
Mm.
And I remember everybody was like listening to this in the formation, right? Walking. And afterwards, people were like, dude, like, that was awesome, man. You really calmed that dude down, man. That was the best approach. Like, I don't know if I would have handled that like that. I might have yelled at that guy, or, pulled
Yeah.
rank on him or whatever. And I just realized, I was like, yeah, like, I could have done all those things, but I chose like just the calm path, just to negotiate, just to be smooth, and to just kind of use that philosophy to handle the situation.
Yeah. As you're telling the story, I can already feel my blood start to boil to just to yell back at somebody, to be like, hey, 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 you don't have to escalate, for whatever reason you feel. And just to take the approach of putting out the fire, it does actually it frees up your time. It frees up your life to be able to pursue the other things that are more important in that moment. I like
Yeah.
in your book, there are so many stories. There are so many stories, and some of them are a
Ask
little,
me about a few of them. What did you like? What did you not like? Tell me about it. I'm excited to hear.
the story. No, I cannot give you the exact name because I took so many notes, I got everybody mixed up. But yes,
Anybody that wants it.
see, both of us twins. You flipped your camera, I didn't. But the thing about the story where the vehicle ended up submerged in water.
Yeah.
Yes. Will you share that one with us?
Sure. That's an experience that happened to Joe Cerna, a great friend of mine.
Yeah.
He's in North Carolina right now, and integral part of Mission 60. So, do you want me to tell the whole story, or just a couple of snapshots of it?
Um, Tell what you feel comfortable with.
Sure. So, Joe is a Green Beret, and in Afghanistan, his team, they took their RG-31 vehicles out on a mission to help another Special Forces detachment.
Mhm.
And on the way to their location, they had to skirt an aqueduct. Essentially, three of their vehicles, their RG-31 vehicles, which are big, kind of armored, sort of tank-looking vehicles,
Right.
They were skirting around this aqueduct, and Joe's vehicle, which is the last of the three vehicles, fell into the aqueduct. The road gave way. They slipped. They fell into the aqueduct. The vehicle was completely capsized. So it was on its roof in the water. And Joe found himself in the vehicle with James, who was the gunner, who was his friend, and then his team sergeant up front of the vehicle in the passenger seat, and then the driver was another member of his team. And so water started rising in the vehicle because they were in an aqueduct. And Joe was stuck in his 5-point seatbelt harness, and James got him out. And so pretty quickly they found out the electronics in the vehicle had gone out. And so they were all and, and unfortunately everybody in the vehicle died except for Joe. And the entire chapter talks about what was going through Joe, what was going on in Joe's mind, what was going on in the vehicle at the time. And he and James were trying hard to open the back door, but the electronics had gone out, so they couldn't open it. They were trying to figure out how to get a flashlight. One thing led to another, and they're basically treading water with their faces, their mouths completely open on the roof just to suck in what little air they could find. And eventually the water rose all the way up to the top and there was no more air in the vehicle. And Joe had to take a deep breath and just kind of go under. And he never wanted to drown. He never wanted to drown or to burn. Those were the two things that he didn't want to happen to, that would ultimately end his life. That's not how he wanted to die. And so there's a really powerful moment in the book where he takes his pistol and he puts it to his head and he locks the hammer back and he thinks to himself, I'm just going to kill myself. I can't, I'm going to die. And then he has a moment of self-reflection where he thinks about what he's done with his life and his family, and he drops the weapon and it sort of kind of spins to the bottom of the vehicle and he passes out, and he kind of wakes up and he passes out a few times and, he struggles, his lungs are on fire, and talks about like his experience with the afterlife very briefly.
Mhm.
And ultimately, his team finally got the vehicle out of the aqueduct after about 40 minutes. And Joe was the only one to survive in the vehicle. James, the team sergeant, and the driver, they all drowned. And And it talks about Joe's experiences after he retired from the Green Berets and kind of dealing with PTSD and,
Yeah.
him going to jail. Unfortunately, he failed one too many DUIs. And he was confined to one night in a jail cell in Cumberland County in North Carolina. And the Judge Oliveira, was a veteran as well,
Yeah.
and he knew that Joe was going to have a hard time with this, and so he actually showed up at the detention facility and stayed the night in jail with Joe. So the judge and Joe stayed the night in jail together, and the judge did that, to make sure that Joe was going to be okay, and he wasn't going to, you know, um, have any flashbacks or PTSD or lose his mind. So that's one of my favorite chapters in the book, and it's just absolutely straight authentic, um, and uh, and I really feel for Joe. He's a great friend of mine, and it was a great. Um, hopefully that chapter impacts a lot of people.
Yeah, that chapter is I think towards the middle of the book, and I actually that one actually kind of got me. Just every piece of that story was so difficult. It was just difficult to take in and to think about. Was it an IED that had turned over the vehicle in the first place?
No, it was just they slipped.
They slipped.
They
Yeah.
slipped. There was a small little, we call it a goat trail, and they thought to themselves, "Oh, we can get up this. It's a little dangerous. We have to be very careful." And then the first two vehicles did. They got up, but they had degraded the road so much that the third vehicle slipped. The road gave way and just crumbled, and they just slipped into the aqueduct.
What was it about that story that made you feel like including it in your manuscript? Because I know you ended up whittling it down from 800 to
Yeah.
much smaller.
Joe was introduced to me when I was at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and our client at the time was the Oakland Raiders. And one of the team sergeants there, he said, "Hey, I got a perfect guy for you. You should take this guy out to the Raiders. He's a huge Raiders fan." And he introduced me to Joe Cerna. And Joe Cerna is from Stockton, California, which is right outside Oakland. He's like, I'm a diehard Oakland Raiders fan. He's like, "Check it out." And he pulled his shirt up, and he had an Oakland Raiders tattoo, you know?
Yeah.
And so I was like, "Okay, man, like, well, tell me your story a little bit." And he kind of started to share with me some of his stories.
Yeah.
And I started to learn about Joe, and we started to develop a friendship. And the first story he told me was, it was crazy. And he told this to the Oakland Raiders. He was in Afghanistan, and he was interrogating a high value target. They had captured him in this village, and it was Joe and this, we call him an HVT, high value target, in this room together.
Uh-huh.
And there was two chairs and a small table in between them. And Joe was talking to this guy and through an interpreter, and he found out that he was lying, and they're like, "This is the guy, we're getting information." And so what Joe failed to do was properly conduct, a pat down and check for weapons and equipment on this HVT.
Mm-hmm.
The HVT actually had a grenade hidden in his headdress, and his sort of like a turban. And he took out the grenade in front of Joe, pulled the pin, and threw it at Joe. And so Joe kicked the table that they were facing each other across from, and ducked. The grenade went off, badly injured Joe, and Joe had to fight this Taliban fighter, and they were fighting, and they basically crawled out of the hut that they were in. The team found him, and they called the medevac. And Joe was like bleeding out. He was about to die, the whole thing. And they called the medevac, and they got the interpreter, Joe, and the Taliban fighter on this medevac to go get treated at a facility. And the British actually had the medical facilities in Afghanistan in that area.
Mm-hmm.
And the rule is that you treat Americans first, or coalition forces soldiers first. Then you treat the Afghans, then you treat, any enemy fighters. And so when Joe came in, being Hispanic with a beard, he looked like he
Not
was an
like the American
Afghan.
forces.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he was not an American. And so they were like, oh, we'll take care of this guy later. Let's take care of these other guys first. And so they just left Joe there to bleed out and basically die. And he would have died. And one of his teammates came in. They're like, hey, what are you doing? You need to operate on this guy. And they're like, no, we can't. We have to treat these Americans first. And his buddy was like, he is an American. And he's like, no, he's an Afghan. He's like, no, he's an American. And they're like, well, prove it. And they took Joe's shirt off, and he had an Oakland Raiders tattoo on his shoulder. And his teammate said, do you know of any Afghans with an Oakland Raiders tattoo? And they're like, no, we don't. So we'll take care of him. So they treated Joe. They saved his life. And so Joe told that story to the Oakland Raiders team,
Yeah.
which was really powerful for them to know how much they impacted his life and saved his life.
Yeah.
And as we were talking, Joe just kept telling me story after story after story, just like powerful stories, getting Purple Hearts, like the things that he's been through and done in his life. And the story about the RG-31 just was, to me, it just spoke to me. It was a very powerful experience. And he doesn't share it with anybody. And I was able to like really deep dive into it and get him to open up and tell us, like, he hasn't told anyone this at any point, at any time in his life. Like, he doesn't even, when he speaks, he doesn't even talk about this.
Yeah.
And so he was able to kind of share this with me, and he was proud to do so. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. When you worked with the Raiders, did any of them express any feelings about the story that Joe had shared?
Oh yeah. Like, there were plenty of emotional guys, specifically guys that were at the organization for a long time, and they're just like, man, I can see the power that we have, just by playing sports, and thank you for sharing that with us. And I'd hope they had done more and, turned Joe into an official mascot, or, brought him out onto the field of every game from there on out, but they didn't go that route. I hope that they would have,
Yeah.
but it was pretty powerful for the team.
Yeah. Every part of Joe's story, this new one that you've just shared and the one in the book, every part of it is amazing. Especially, I really appreciated the part where the judge recognized that for Joe to be in that confined space by himself, because that was the sentencing that came down, would be problematic. And the
Yeah.
amount of empathy that judge showed was huge. And just that small piece in the story, like, I was already like super emotional just reading that chapter, and then you get to that end and the judge is willing to totally put down his life and recognize that somebody else needed him by his side. That was an amazing thing. And I know that that's actually one of those concepts that you push a lot, that in order to be okay, you need to pay attention to the people to the left and to the right of you. Will you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. It's almost counterintuitive to what we believe or how we think right now. It seems like society is always out for number one.
Mm-hmm.
How can I help myself, make more money, or outcompete the guy we're trying to vie for the same job, or whatever. And almost counterintuitively, they teach you the opposite as you're going through special forces training.
Right.
And the story that I'll share is of day one, of physical training, for selection for the special forces. Like, day one, the first day you show up, they try to break you off by doing very intense physical activity.
Yeah.
And the reason why they do that is because the shock value of stress overload and physical domination is absolutely the best discriminator when you're trying to assess an individual or a group's willingness and capacity to accomplish difficult tasks, right? And so we started off with log PT, or log physical training. So there's a big log, like 300 pounds, some of them, the various weights. And as a team, you hold this log over your head and you do some exercises, put it to your shoulders, and then you get on the ground and you do push-ups with it. You do kind of relay races with it. You do bicep curls with it. Just hold it over your head.
Yeah.
And when you first start, everybody's excited and everybody's shouting and cheering and whatever. And then after 20 minutes, nothing.
You're done.
Everybody shuts up. Like
Yeah.
it's just grunting and just like straining and just breathing hard. And, and then there are people that basically your instructors like will quit. And a lot of people do. They just get up and they're like, this sucks. This isn't for me.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody else is just thinking to themselves, when is this going to be over? What did I get myself into? When is this going to end? How much longer can I keep this up? Is this all worth it? Should I quit as well? All these negative thoughts are kind of creeping into your mind. And while it was going on, for whatever reason, like instead of using the limited energy that you had, that I had on myself, just kind of focusing on like, let me just focus and concentrate and just try to conserve energy. I just looked up, I lifted my head and I just looked around, and there were plenty of other teams, with logs over their head.
Yeah.
And I just kind of was looking at them and I realized, man, these guys are suffering just as bad as me, if not worse.
Yeah.
And in that moment, I saw one of my friends, and he was on another team, and he looked at me and we looked at each other and kind of smiled a little bit and just kind of gave each other that look, like that smirk, like this sucks, man, and he said, "Hey Jay, let's go, man. You got this."
Yeah.
That's all he said. And it kind of gave me the inspiration to shout back at him. I was like, "Let's go, Pat. You got it, baby."
Yeah.
Or whatever. And all of a sudden a couple of people heard and they lifted their heads up and they looked at us and they started smiling as well. And then they said, "Let's go, man. Let's go, Jay. Let's go. We can do this." And all of a sudden a few more people did it, and a few more people did it, and it became infectious in a way. And while we were doing this, we realized that all of a sudden, like the logs became lighter. In reality, the logs didn't become lighter.
Right.
All of a sudden, like we weren't bothered by the heat as much as we were. Like the heat didn't let up, still was there. We just started to forget about it, because when we started to forget about our own pain, our own challenges, our own, our own fears and what's holding us back, when we start to focus on other people, when we start to focus on the people to our left and to our right, that's when you really understand what it's all about. That's when you understand that it's not about you, it's about them. And if you can help them succeed, they're going to help you succeed. You have that aha moment. And to me, it was, you find your purpose in that aha moment. And the purpose is helping the team succeed. And after this event was over, we had another 2.5 years of training, in the woods and classroom, and just really difficult times until you earn your Green Beret. And I remember standing in formation, earning my Green Beret for the first time. Plenty of other guys around. And I looked around again. I lifted my head up and I just kind of looked around. And I noticed that the guys that were all in formation with me were all the guys that lifted their heads up on day one. All the guys that were not self-centered, that didn't risk any energy, that, that risked energy that didn't immediately serve their own needs.
Right.
Yeah. And that is, to me, the secret of the elite mindset of the Special Operations Forces. I feel like no matter how many podcasts you listen to or books you read about Navy SEALs or Green Berets or Rangers or Delta Force, I feel like that's the secret. It's the secret to success. And it's simply just look up, realize that you're not by yourself, realize that there's a team around you. And if you focus on them, then you're going to win.
Thank you. Thank you. I 1000% believe you. Yeah, I've seen it so many times. I do believe, this is the sad part, I am enjoying your story so much, but I think we're coming up on your hard stop here.
Yeah, we'll go 10 more minutes and then I got a boogie, but I appreciate it. This has been a lot of fun. Hopefully this has been valuable for you and your audience.
It's been valuable for me. I'll ask the audience later. Tell me at least one more story that you feel like kind of set you apart.
Ask me about something in the book, because I love the fact that you read the book.
Oh, I love the book. I've read it twice.
Thankful. That actually means a lot to me. That means a lot to me. Thank you. Even with something that you don't like or disagree with, or you had a question about, anything at all about the book, ask me. And I love it when people read the book and then ask me questions about it, because it's like, man, this is awesome. You read the book and you understand, and this is cool. So I appreciate you doing that.
Yeah, well, you know what? I'll tell you this. I saw an advertisement for your book, right? Like maybe I think it was somewhere around the first 2 weeks of March. And I was so excited and I ordered it, and then we went into lockdown, and then it took forever for Amazon to get that book to my door because we went to lockdown.
I heard
And
about that.
yeah,
Amazon. So many, yeah, a lot of that. That's frustrating. What do you do?
but I got the book, and the thing is, I was on vacation, and when I came back, the book got here right as I got back into town. So it's perfect. Like now I get back into town, I can't do anything, and my book arrived, and I
Right.
read it. And as I read through it the first time, I was taking notes that pertained to the job that I was doing. Right, everything in there. To me, it was like it's more like a
Yeah.
textbook full of like amazing history. Um, but there's one idea that I even found. I am a believer in death by lecture. I love to lecture my kids until they just, stop talking to me. Like, yeah, that's worse than a lot of things I could do. So I found myself last night lecturing my oldest son and using the story where the soldier said, I don't know if it was your team. Again, I got everybody so mixed up. I was so excited. But they had gone back to a village that they had been helping, a village that had needed aid, had needed food, and they
Yeah.
had helped, and they brought in all of this baby food,
Yeah,
right?
that's me. Sure. I remember that
Was
story.
that you?
Yeah.
Yes. Will you tell that story? I lectured my kid to death on this because I was trying to explain to him, not everyone sees things the same way. Just because you think you're right doesn't always mean that you're right. So will you share with us the story?
Sure. Sure. So it's it's in chapter 7 of the book, and it talks about culture, and it talks about what's truth to me isn't truth to you. What makes sense to me doesn't necessarily make sense to you. And that's something that was very hard for me to understand as an American, because there's a certain way that we go about our business that we know works.
Yeah.
And if we do this, we'll have success. However, that isn't always true when you go to other countries, specifically third world countries.
Mhm.
Like it just doesn't make sense to them. Like the concept of freedom is just so driven into our psyches in the United States, where in Iraq, like it just doesn't resonate as much. It doesn't make sense to them. And it's hard to describe that and to explain that if you haven't been there and seen there and done that. But I tried to do that in chapter 7. So we went on missions, and we would deliver soccer balls and food and medical supplies and sometimes Gerber baby food and things like that. And we were doing this to help people, but also probably more importantly, we're doing it to gather information, to gather intel, to talk to people, to find out who the bad guys were, where they were operating, who in the village might be collaborating with them, and so forth. And so we would do this several times over the course of our deployment. And this one particular time, we came back to a village that we had given a lot of these supplies to, Gerber baby food being one of them. And I was walking around, and I saw some empty Gerber baby food bottles, and I was kind of surprised by that. It didn't seem like it made a whole lot of sense. And then I saw an adult-sized spoon in one of the bottles, and it just kind of pissed me off. And I found this, it was kind of like a mud hut sort of thing. And there was this door, and I kind of opened the door, and there was an old man in there in a dish dash, very old, laying on a bed of mats and reeds and everything. And there was Gerber baby food, empty bottles all throughout this room. And it just pissed me off because I knew this guy who had been eating the food,
Yeah.
and we gave the food to the mothers so that they could feed their babies, because the babies were malnourished. They were dying. Like it was awful. And so I picked this guy up, and I just kind of, yelled at him a little bit. And I was just like, "You've been stealing this food. I don't want to curse or anything on the show, but I was just kind of yelling at him." And I told my interpreter to come in, and the interpreter said, that this man hadn't been stealing the food, that the mothers gave him the food. And I said, that's a lie. That's BS. And
Right.
I told my interpreter to go get the mothers that we'd given the food to. And he went and found a few of them, brought them in. And I was like, sort of like, ladies, you're not in trouble. Like, I'm trying to protect you. I just want to know, this man is claiming that you gave him this food. I
Yeah.
know it's a lie. I just need you to tell me that this is a lie. And they were kind of looking at each other, and they're like, no, we gave him the food. And I was like, you're lying. Like, you don't have to lie. Just tell me the truth. Tell me he stole this food from you. And they got on their knees and they were begging. They're like, no, sir, Captain, Jason, we gave him the food. We gave him the food, and I was like, we gave you this food so you could feed your babies, not so you could give it to this guy. Like, look, and I picked up a bottle and I pointed to the baby on the bottle. And I was like, this is baby food. This is for your babies, not for this guy. And their response was like, well, if our babies die, we'll just have more. But if our elders die, if he dies, then we lose all of the knowledge and the experience in the village. He's the catalyst. He kind of keeps the village together, and he talks, to other villages on our behalf, and he does all this stuff for us. And I was just kind of shocked. And I was like, so you'd rather this guy live than your children?
Mhm.
And they were like, of course. Like, that's yes. Like, what, it doesn't make sense about that,
Mhm.
And I was kind of thinking out loud. I was like, well, in America, when our elders get old, we put them in an old folks home, and we feel very good about that. And we say, you know what, they lived a long and healthy life. This is the circle of life. This is what happens. They die, they were happy and they were old, and just kind of how you deal with it. And it makes sense in the American mindset.
It does. Yeah.
And they kind of looked at me just like with disgust, just like, that's how you treat your elders in America?
Yeah.
Like, if you do that, like, we don't believe that you do that, but if you do that, then you are a monster. And I was just kind of like, wow, like, okay.
Yeah.
Like, that is a huge culture shock. And I thought to myself, like, I'm an American living in Afghanistan, or in Iraq. I wasn't in Afghanistan, living in Iraq with zero awareness of this culture. Conversely, these Iraqi, I don't want to say Afghanistan, these Iraqis have zero awareness of what the American culture is.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of like how it kind of went down. So it was, that's what we put in the book. And that's sort of hopefully a very powerful message about the mindset of different cultures, and what's true to you is not true to somebody else, if that makes sense.
It does. And that is a great takeaway. But what do you do with that kind of information? That what's true to you is not necessarily true to someone else. Where's the application on that?
So it's a lesson about culture, and it's a lesson about, being empathetic and listening and opening up and trying to get to know somebody or or people, right? Or a culture, and say, listen, I'm not going to come in here and say that I know you or what you've been through or what you've gone through or anything like that, but I'm here to listen. I'm here to learn.
Yeah.
I'm here to digest. And I may not agree with you in the end, but I'm going to get on the same page with you so we can have a relationship, so we can build something, create something together.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, what's most important.
I do love that, because it circles all the way back around, excuse me, to what you said in the beginning about, yeah, I'm a great fighter. I can fight all day long, but it's not worth it to take up every single battle. It's better to make a friend of your enemy rather than more enemies. Yeah. I really appreciate
something that our country needs to hear right now. I feel like there's too many people being offended and being indignant at everything. If we just shut up and listened, to each other, and stopped interrupting each other and just said, okay, I'm here to listen. The difference between a good Green Beret and a great Green Beret is his ability to listen. That's what my commander told me when I first met him.
Yeah.
And so I
That's
try
part
to
of
do my
chapter 1,
best.
by the way.
Say that one more time.
That was the best part of chapter 1.
Oh,
that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I shotgun blasted a lot of information in chapter 1, and then I realized I probably need to just focus on 1 or 2 concepts for the rest of the chapter. So anyway, glad you got that out of chapter 1.
Oh, it's a great book. It really is a great book and a great read. Just, I mean, so much information in there. That I just wanted to mention also, I really appreciate that you have chronicalized the experiences of these soldiers. I have an uncle who served in Vietnam, and I know he doesn't remember telling me what happened to him in order for him to get his Purple Heart, and it's because he didn't tell it to me. He told it to his brother, and nobody noticed that I was sitting in the room.
Wow.
And I know that story has put into perspective so many other things, you know, so many other things. Just understanding what he's been through and what he's seen makes such a huge difference in the way that I look at the rest of the family and the experiences that they've had that have impacted my life. I appreciate that you have created a history here. It's a beautiful history.
I
Thank you.
appreciate the appreciate. Thank you for saying that. It's been awesome. I really enjoyed being on the show. You're a sweetheart. You're very sincere and authentic, and
Thank
it's
you.
just been a lot of fun. So thank you.
Thank you. Tell the people where they can find you and where they can find your book.
Sure thing. So you can find me on social media. I tend to do a lot of work on LinkedIn. So you can find me at Jason Van Camp. I'm not super active on Facebook or Instagram, but you can find me there as well. And then my company Mission 60 is on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. We post all the time, every day. So you can engage with us there. You can send me a direct message on any one of them, and I do my very best to respond to anybody that has something that they want to say to me or sincerely want to connect with me. You can buy the book right now on Amazon. The hardcover's out. Obviously, it's been out for about 3 months. We've sold almost 18,000 copies. So Amazon #1 bestseller, which is awesome. The ebook is out this week, and it's for sale for 99 cents this week only. And that ends on Saturday night. And the audiobook, I just finished wrapping that up yesterday, and that'll be out in June, probably like June 15th, around that time. And you can find all that stuff on Amazon or wherever books are sold. And so you can go from there.
Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. I really appreciate your time. Hey, go out and get the book. Read it. It'll change your life. Yes.
Thank you, Pela. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. And then we'll have this up for you later on YouTube if you didn't catch the live.